Hello, hi, I'm Sophie. So before I start, I just want to take a little quick poll of the room just to see who we've got with us today. So who in the room, show of hands, is new to PM, kind of first year, 2 years? Okay, a few. Who's got a project management certification like Scrum Master, Prince 2, similar? We're educated people. And who kind of considers themselves like a bit more experienced, to say maybe 5 years or more kind of into the industry? Cool, I like the split. All right, so the reason why I did that is because I'm not here to teach you anything new. I'm here to impart some wisdom that I found across my time, maybe kind of give you a little thing or two that you can take back and deliver in your project delivery. So in the Digital PM Summit in 2017, Brett asked the community, what is your most commonly used methodology? And a resounding 67% of people said hybrid. This is my cat, Thunderous Bandit, very shocked when he found out that people use hybrid delivery. So there is obviously a clear movement in the industry to move to a more agile-based delivery. Obviously, it works really, really well for software delivery. However, in the reality of a client-supplier relationship, like the one that I'm in, we do still live in a world of tight budgets and unrealistic timescales. Something that Stephen said this morning, that Expelliarmus quote, was a deep cut for me because that is life on a regular basis. And so hybrid can occur when the supplier recommends an agile delivery, but there are commercial or procurement teams that haven't really caught up with more iterative ways of delivery, or the client wants to know what they're getting, when they're getting it, and how much they're getting it for. So hybrid can be good when deployed well, but you can also end up in a fixed price, fixed timeline project with all the benefits of agile delivery, which is win-win for your client, but lose-lose for you and probably your sanity. So I was sat doing these slides with my friend on Monday night. He's a creative director, and he sat back and he said to me, seems to me like hybrid delivery is a bit like the making of a good mixtape. And he's kind of right. If I'm honest with you, planning projects is like the making of a good mixtape. It's a very subtle art, and you really need to think about the flow to make sure that you take your team on the right journey in the same way that you take your listener on the right journey with a mixtape. This is a quote from my favourite film, High Fidelity. So, true hybrid combines the principles and elements of both waterfall and agile, but deployed at the right times. So I see these tools as tools in my toolbox that I utilise at the right times in my project to try and ensure success. So what tools do we need to succeed? So I'm going to talk to you about 4 aspects of project delivery: project initiation, communication, delivery, and what's next. So project initiation is really, really key for me. This is where you are going to set the groundwork of your project delivery. You are going to try and make sure that everyone's on the same page and everyone's happy with what you're going to deliver and how you're going to deliver it before you start. So for me, a statement of work can be quite key here. So it outlines what we're delivering, how we're delivering it, and more importantly, what we're not delivering. It can be really easy to fall into blurred lines during a hybrid delivery, and therefore you really need to set your stall out early on what it is that we're doing and not doing. I think that documentation can feel really restrictive and a bit like red tape that you just need to get through so that we can actually do the do. But if done right, it can make sure that everyone is on the same page, everyone's happy, and you're not going to get into tricky situations. So don't shy away. Involve your client in this process, walk them through the document, make sure that they understand everything and that they're happy with it before we move forward. If you are delivering a hybrid project, it's likely that you'll be breaking your project down into key phases. So at a minimum, you're going to want a discover, define phase and then your delivery phase. This can help you to de-risk things from a budget perspective, and it can also help you to fully define your product before you deliver it, and then that will help you to scope out exactly what it is that you're building. I've realised I've not been flicking through my slides. Then you're going to want to have a kick-off session. That should be a collaborative session between your full delivery team and your client-side team as well. This can be a really good time to completely outline the scope of your project and your timelines, and it can be really useful to do a review of your timelines in the form of a journey that you put up on the wall and that you walk through with your client like you would a customer journey. It can also be really useful to map out the stakeholders in your project, both the ones that your key kind of day-to-day delivery team and client team, but also who your wider client stakeholders are that might influence your project or have an interest in your project. So you can do this in the form of a collaborative RACI exercise as part of your workshop. And this can help you to identify the people who you're going to need to bring in at key stages, but also might want to come in and derail your project at the time that you least need it. You should also deep dive into the actions and the deliverables within the project. Especially with deliverables, it can be really useful to show your client examples of the kinds of deliverables that they're going to get. So it's more tangible for them and they can understand exactly what format, what it's going to look like and how it's going to be useful to them. Finally, it can be really good to set goals, objectives and KPIs during this phase. This can make sure that you keep on track and can be really useful during those really tricky what if, couldn't it just conversations that are inevitably going to come up, because you can bring people back round into exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. You can also define a key problem statement or a vision statement or a hypothesis that you can then take back and put up on the wall in your project space, and we'll talk about project spaces later, to help remind everyone why we're doing what we're doing. Overall, this initiation phase is really, really key in gaining the trust and respect of your client. You really can't underestimate the power of a good client relationship, because this is really going to help you later down the line if you have any tricky conversations, because you've put that groundwork in to have a really good working relationship with them. So, moving on to communication. Now, obviously, communication is a really, really key part of our project delivery. And as part of that, I always recommend stand-ups, demos and retros. Now, there's a reason why they're a really key underpinning part of an agile delivery. They promote regular comms, visibility and transparency across all of your team. Stand-ups can allow for good team rapport and trains the team to communicate on a regular basis, sharing their progress, how they're doing, if they have any blockers, and helping each other to work through what it is they're delivering. Demos allow you to step back regularly to review what you're doing and make sure that what you're doing is the right thing. And retros, again, can allow you to step back, but in a different way, and look at how we're delivering and say, can we do better? What should we be doing more of? And what should we be doing less of or stop doing? As I mentioned before, it is really useful to have a project team space, a project war room for everyone, but I understand that that isn't always feasible for people, especially if you have teams across multiple locations. But if you can, make sure that your teams are located together in a project space. This means that you can put assets up on the wall so everyone can see what you're doing, but you can also use that hypothesis statement or that mission vision statement. You can put that up on the wall as well so that everyone's reminded of what the end game is. So, Programme Board is generally looked at as a governance piece that generally is in more of a waterfall type project. You are obviously going to be speaking to your client on a day-to-day basis, and you are going to be having regular ceremonies like demos and retros, but I find that it can be really useful to step back on a monthly basis to look at your delivery, bring in those wider stakeholders that you identified on your RACI, and use that time to look at your project delivery, make any key project decisions, review your RAID log, and make sure that everyone's happy with the path that you're taking on your project plan. And finally, RAID logs. They are really critical that you manage your risks and issues and dependencies when you're in a hybrid project. And again, this is another thing that we really shouldn't shy away from. Involve your delivery teams in the shaping of them. They will help you define risks and define dependencies, and they'll help you work through that mitigation, but also be really transparent with them, with your client as well, because this can help you later down the line if you do encounter some of these issues, if you have already been discussing them throughout the duration of your project. So, moving on to delivery. I think any project, especially a hybrid project, should start with a discovery phase. That includes a level of user research. A discovery will help shape what it is that you're doing from both a user need and a business need. And it will also help you, as I said earlier, to shape your costs and de-risk your budget when it comes into that delivery phase. Every project should start with a phase of research to draw it back to your user and to your objectives. But research is not a one-off thing that you should do at the start of the project and never do again. Obviously, budgets are tight, and research can cost a lot of money. Clients can see it as kind of not optional, optional, something we don't have to do. But it is really key, and it's really important to make sure that you're shaping the right thing. There are also really quick and dirty ways of validating that what you're doing is the right thing throughout the journey. So do consider different routes of research that are not time and budget heavy. So developing in sprints. Now, if you're in a hybrid project, it's likely that you might have a fixed timeline for your delivery. But that doesn't mean that you need to start your development and QA team off on day one and say, hey, here's what you need to build. I'll see you in 3 months' time. Get them to break that down into 2, 3, 4-week sprint phases. Make sure that they have a backlog that they review on a regular basis, and that they are planning how they're going to pull work into the sprint and how they're going to work together on that, because that will really help de-risk things. Obviously, you'll review your backlog. You might not do that in the way of adding or changing your scope. You've likely fixed your scope at this point, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't review our backlog, because we're learning things as we build. We're learning that actually we did this one way, so that might impact how we develop that thing, or actually there's a different way of doing this to still achieve the same goal. So it still helps to make sure your team are consistently looking back at what's left to do and make sure that they're doing it in the right way. And finally, a change request budget. Again, if we're in a fixed price, fixed timeline project, then that kind of says, oh, there isn't an allowance for change. But you can broach and plan for this. So you can agree with your client a budget pot, and therefore an amount of days that you can allow for change to occur, and you can plan where this is going to happen. This means that if change requests do come up through the journey, that doesn't mean that you have to say no. You just have to say, okay, we'll put that on our change backlog, we'll keep that prioritized, and when we get to that point of allowing change into the project, then we'll estimate that and we'll bring that through so that we can allow ourselves to respond to business need or to user need once we have locked in what we're doing. So finally, what's next? Is this the end? No. In software delivery, we know that it's never actually the end once we've finished a phase of delivery. And so where possible, you should try really early on in the phase to have these conversations with your client and start to talk to them about what comes next after this phase of work. You could have deprioritized elements that weren't key for this phase but still wants to be done. And if not, do some research. Find out how this product is being received by your user and by the business. What can we add to make it better? What do we need to tweak and change? Is there something completely new that hasn't surfaced before because the way that your product is being consumed by the user, there's different needs now. So assess the lay of the land and see what it is that you can do to continually build. Just because we're not in a continuous, iterative, agile delivery doesn't mean that we can't look to phase work and make sure that we are continuing to improve our product. So, obviously, once we start our projects, we always have really lofty ambitions for how they're going to go, and they don't always turn out the way that we planned them to. That doesn't mean they went wrong, but we know that once we put our project plan in place, we know it's inevitably going to change pretty soon. So hopefully I have shared some useful tools that you might want to take away and help improve your project delivery. They all center around the 3 C's: communication, collaboration, and coordination. And if you've got those 3 elements sorted, then you're pretty much on your way to a fairly built-out project delivery. Thank you very much.